Hello, Belen community, and thank you for joining us on this AVE sponsored by BITS. It's been a while since we have an AVE, and a little bit of history about the AVE, which I always like to mention when we start these events, is how they came about. And these virtual events came about during COVID, and the gentleman that gave the name to this event was Rick Raimundes. When we were talking about this, and him and I were talking, and he goes, "Why don't we let's just call it AVE? I go, what does that stand for?" And he goes, "Alumni Virtual Events." So to me, all those virtual events that we had during COVID and after, and the fact that we're picking it up again, and BITS has graciously volunteered to start it up again, and we have a great guest speaker today. So I'd like to thank Rolly Vicaria from BITS, our chairman from BITS, Pep Lopez Roda, as well, president of the alumni board, and Andres Vigil from the class of 2003 for putting this together, and Cameron, thank you so much for joining us and enlightening us in this, artificial intelligence project with Wendy's that you got going. So with that said, I'd like to welcome you and thank you all for joining us, and good luck. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us. And by the way, I'll just say this at the top of the hour. I'm going to put a little survey in here while we get our speaker going. But we're kind of doing a little bit of testing with different times to see how we can hit the alumni groups at different times of the day, whether evening works better or late afternoon like this time call. So feel free to provide input on that as we try to schedule some more of these as we move forward. But without further ado, I wanted to introduce Cam Heitland. Cam and I worked together for a period of time at Google, and now we're kind of like on brother-sister teams. And he's definitely one of the smarter people I've interacted with, and really one of the really good people out here at Google. So he's done some really, really cool things in the AI space, specifically with Wendy's, but a lot broader than that as well. And so I begged, borrowed, and stole Cam for an hour to come and talk to us. And we're planning to keep this informal. So if you have questions, obviously we have a pretty small group here. If you have questions, feel free to unmute. There's also like a little raise the hand button in Meet if you're not familiar. It's like 2 buttons from the left of the hang up button. So if you want to raise your hand, if you want to do that, great. If you want to put it in chat because you can't talk or maybe it's noisy wherever you are, that works too. So thanks, Cam, again. Do appreciate it. And over to you.
Hey, anytime, man. No, I appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about this one. So with Wendy's, like this all came out as soon as generative AI came out. Like we started playing with this, and it's been a cool journey. It's pretty funny. Like originally when we were working on like these generative models, people didn't want to release them because they were like lying to people about different topics and etc. And then OpenAI released it, and they're like, well, we can release it. And so it's been cool to see like just the progression of all of this, and just how easy it is to like interact with AI now. Like it was so difficult in the past that you had to train a model, get data, list goes on of how difficult it was, but now we can really just utilize AI going forward. But this is kind of my experience. I'm actually from Columbus, where Wendy's is headquartered and where they started. So it's been a cool journey and something fun to work on. But just a little background about me. AI/ML specialist. Used to work at Abercrombie & Fitch, not the store. Actually an IT corporate store. My grandparents always told everybody I worked at the store. And then I worked at DSW and IT as well, in application development. But it's cool. I'm sure all of us, or most of us, I would think, have worked with like ChatGPT or Gemini in the past. And so you're familiar with like text generation or recipe generation or image generation, all of the cool things that you can use these large language models for. But it's so insane how quickly these things have changed, from people like writing full applications with just asking these large language models what to do, but then being able, from what we released in IO, to say, hey, look at this entire video in this live stream, tell me where I put my glasses, or tell me how to fix my fire alarm that's beeping. Like this is changing day by day, and it's pretty cool. And it will continue to change day by day. So you got to keep up with it at all times. Just some of the releases that we do, like interacting with Google search, etc. But the important piece is, we talk a lot about text generation, summarization, image generation, etc. But the one cool thing that we did with these large language models is how to act as a Wendy's order taker. So I'll talk some more about that as we go, but it's a really creative way to use these large language models going forward. So just to kind of set the standard of where we went. And again, feel free to stop me at any point. I'm pretty ADHD, so you can just stop me. I'll jump on a point, jump off a point, no big deal. But we did a big partnership with Wendy's. This was throughout their whole IT organization, and we wanted to bring AI to the store. If any of you have went to a Wendy's, there's not a lot of AI there before. Sometimes you get the right food, sometimes you don't. It's tough. We wanted to really simplify some of that journey, but also more focus on how do we help employees at the end of the day. So we did this big press release, and one really important thing that sticks out here and sticks out why we did the drive-through ordering platform is that Wendy's created the drive-through. I think it's over 80% of people go through the drive-through to get food every day, where most of the sales go through. So you can see why we started at the drive-through, why we were working on something through the drive-through, and why we want to continue to innovate, because that's where they started. They want to continue to make the drive-through better. So we started with this Fresh AI platform, and anyone who's worked in AI probably knows that a lot of times in AI, we stray from what business value is. So where we started is right at the center. How do we improve labor? People turn over 300% with stores every year. Increase throughput for orders, reduce training costs, increase upselling. So, hey, you asked for a junior bacon cheeseburger. Let's see if we can get you a combo. Reduce fraud, and fraud can mean a lot of things, which is very interesting, like not paying for sauces. People just throwing them in the bag. You have to pay for those. So programmatically, how can you solve some of those challenges, along with improving employee and customer satisfaction? So I'm kind of skipping past some of this because this is like the background on it. But the big thing is we went through this, and we got challenged by like Kevin Vasconi, the CIO, dude's awesome, is how can we use these large language models to solve food ordering? And how can we do that at a store that the hardware is super old, microphone quality is a challenge, along with just taking an order is super difficult. So I got a fun little exercise here, I'm guessing, but how can we innovate at that drive-thru? And so you can put this in the chat, or you can just speak up here, like, how many combinations are there for a Dave's Double? So think about, like, I want a Dave's Double with light mayo and heavy ketchup, or heavy ketchup and heavy mayo. Like, how many combinations are there of ways you can order a Dave's Double, do you think?
Yeah, and if you want to just throw some ideas in the chat, throw some numbers. It's a fairly large number if you want to guess.
I know you know, Andres, because I think I've told you like
I saw it.
Yeah.
So 200.
Yeah, keep going on the number.
Yeah.
Like a lot. All right, well, let's walk through it. So if we look at this, for a lot of these different places, customization isn't a big deal. You kind of get what comes on the burger, maybe a couple of slight changes, but Rally's has 1,200. Hardee's has about 2,100. McDonald's, I think this is the Big Mac, is 65,000. Burger King's about 165,000. Jack in the Box, 620,000. With Wendy's, a lot bigger, it's 202 billion different combinations and way you can order a Dave's Double. We had people who do math a lot better than I do. They verified this number. This is a real number. But you can think about like how difficult it would be and like almost impossible to programmatically handle all of those different combinations, even with traditional AI/ML and training. One challenge is there's no recordings at the stores because in different states you have to deal with like two-way compliance, etc. But just even programmatically handling all these combinations via code is almost impossible. And then the menu actually changes every single month. So you can add a new type of burger, you can add a new type of bun, you can add a new type of sauce, and that dramatically increases or decreases the amount of combinations. So it's very difficult to keep up with, along with the fact that the menu is actually different per store. And there are 4 different menus per store, I think based on French, Spanish, English, and there's one more. I can't remember. So it's incredibly difficult to handle and deal with. And this is where, you know, from our side, large language models were able to help this. And this is actually a true fact. There are more Wendy's ordering cost possibilities than the number of atoms in the universe. But I think how this breaks down, you have to think about this programmatically, is we have to not only deal with taking the order, we have to deal with the hardware at the store. So speech going into the mic. This could be handling rain sounds. This could be handling like super loud cars, like a Raptor or something else. You have to handle that at the edge. You then have to handle bad internet and not having a ton of like wire on that side. But along with just all these different combinations and how it breaks down, and then putting that like unstructured sentence into a POS system like NCR, et cetera. It's definitely a lot of challenge, but this is how this kind of breaks down. So if we think of someone saying this sentence, can I have a burger with onions and cheese? What does A mean, right? A is a reference to the burger, so it's a single burger, reference to that noun. All right, that's one part of the problem you have to solve. And then what's a burger, right? Like if someone said a burger, do they mean a Dave single? Do they mean a Dave's double? Do you ask them a follow-up question to get that? If you ask them too many follow-up questions, they start to get frustrated. So you then have to use analytics to say, what are most people asking for when they say a burger? In our case, it's a Dave single because it's one of the most popular burgers there. And then it gets crazier on the breakdown. I feel like I'm like in Inception, where it just keeps getting deeper in the dream. So it's like, well, what are onions? And like this one drove me insane, which is like, what are onions, right? Well, they only have crispy onions and sweet onions. So they don't, like when you say onions, that doesn't work. And I had to deal with like the ops people constantly fighting me on that one. And I was right. So that's what made the most.
So in that example, what did the ops people want versus what?
They're like, well, we don't have onion tanglers. I'm like, yeah, you do. I looked at this menu a lot. Like, I bet the dude $20. He never paid me, but I bet him $20 straight up. Didn't do it.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest problems that you had, right? The fact that like there were many people, like the menus were not standardized either, right? Not everybody even knew what they offered.
Dude, they were a disaster. Like it was like it's so like some of the IDs didn't match up. You have like some stores have like drinks. So think about like, all right, you go up to a drink. I want a Sprite. I want a Coke. All right, simple. Then they have freestyle drinks, which are a whole different data structure and how you ask it. So we had to flatten that, fix that. Like there are so, and then like just all the IDs and like sometimes when they put in a combo, they don't put in the right burger that ties to the right combo. Like it's never ending on the problems. And that's like, we actually did this and got it released. I think they're at like, I don't know if I can even say the number, but like I think roughly around 10 stores. But there's challenge. I'll talk about like all the challenges and timing that leads up to that. But yeah, like just the data is one of the most important challenges you have to solve that people don't like to solve because it's a hard problem and it takes time. But there are ways to do it, and we have some really good people here that helped out with it. But going further, what cheese, American, etc. You know, you kind of get the gist here, but the challenge is that you have to solve all of these problems in a single structured sentence, but you have to do it quickly too. Because if people wait, then they're going to be frustrated. Or if you ask too many follow-up questions, they're going to be frustrated. You can't ask about all these little pieces. You have to make some assumptions. And so that's where, you know, with large language models, but also in a combination with traditional AI models, we can take this and actually make some sense of it. Kind of talk through some of this on the speed, 50 years, human complexities. That's the one that's really interesting on like, you know, how do you handle someone that says no pickles or I don't want pickles or like the different connotations that way you can say something, along with the synonyms. So, you know, my grandpa, I'm from like Appalachia, Ohio. So my grandpa, when he was here, he would go to Wendy's and be like, hey, can I get Arby's sauce? No, like it's not Arby's, it's a Wendy's. So like, but he would do it and he would be pissed if you didn't solve it for him, right? So like we have to handle things like that to make assumptions of like Arby's sauce is like this, so we will link to this item instead. You know, think about even the ways just saying JBC to junior bacon cheeseburger, milkshake to frosty, like the list goes on and it continues to add, but you have to meet people where they are. It's similar to the Google search problem. Like people don't spell correctly like me. And so you have to get to the right answer and meet them where they are. We had to do that same thing solving these problems. So I think the cool thing about generative AI and where it kind of comes in, I'm starting to get into the tech piece here, is like generative AI, since it's trained on kind of the nuance of human language and predicting tokens, understands what a Wendy's order taker does and how they can handle an actual order and put it into a more structured format. So you think about that example of like, can I get a burger with onions and cheese? That's a challenge for traditional AI ML because it doesn't have the semantics of how like human language really works. It's just a model based on its tokens, and it hashes the different words to try to get the right answer. Like this is trained to understand the actual semantics of what's going on. And so we're able to use a large language model in the creative way that we do it to say, hey, we want you to take this sentence. So we did like a speech to text first to get the audio to text, which is a little bit of a challenge still because you can get it messed up. And we said, okay, you're an order taker. Break this sentence into specific items of the order. So think about like, you know, if I ask for a junior bacon cheeseburger combo or number one, list goes on, I can break that into its individual items into JSON and then send that to a semantic parser that says, hey, JBC, that maps to junior bacon cheeseburger. Or like semantically, these are how these two things attach. Then we send it to then get the ID and the right information for the POS system, along with figuring out, hey, does this combo missing, is it missing a drink? Is it missing a fry? Like, do we have to make some leaps and say, hey, most people get fries with their combo, we're just going to assume it? Like, there's a whole logical layer in that background to say, should I make leaps and bounds, or should I ask a follow-up question to that person to get this right? Size, list goes on those types of things. So that's the really cool piece, and like really the piece that's unlocked all of this, which is the large language model in the middle, to take that sentence and make it to a more structured format, because it's just, it wasn't possible before. I've tried to do it. Tons of people have tried to do it. They failed. That's why it's never worked before. This has really been an unlock for that. So our goal, essentially, it wasn't just like the technological piece. You also have to think like the persona of the bot. What are the visual cues that are out there? So we actually had to combine, you know, not just like, hey, come up and order. We have to combine, hey, you say something, let's change the digital screen to show, you know, if I ask for a junior bacon combo, maybe it would bring the drinks up and show you what drinks are available, or it would show you what sides are available or what customizations you can make on the burger. There's so much more than just having it be a chatbot that to help people get to the right ordering. The one really interesting thing I always bring up, and I think it happens, I mean, think about every time you call your like internet provider, etc. You talk to the bot and you're like, I don't know what to say. That's exactly what happens at Wendy's. Like you go up to the bot and it answers you and you're like, it's a robot. I don't know how to say it or what I should say to it, because we've all dealt with kind of like the shitty bots in the past. You had to specific keywords. It's really interesting that we actually speak English to these words or Spanish or anything. And we're just not used to, it's going to be an interesting evolution for people to actually talk to these things in a more natural way. You'll see. So this is kind of what some of the breakdown of the tech that I was talking about. We had that speaker mic that actually handled some of the noise cancellation at the top row. We did everything cloud-based. Personally, is my own personal opinion, and a lot of people will fight me internally. I don't think it needs to be edge-based, because you're going to deal with a whole challenge of deployment and et cetera and monitoring. So we just went cloud-based because we can iterate much faster. So we have cloud speech. We then have this foundational LLM, like a Gemini, et cetera, to break that structured sentence into that unstructured sentence into a structured format. Then we have the semantic matcher to say, hey, a junior bacon cheeseburger matches to this. This goes on. And then the ordering companion, which can help with business rules. So can you order this? Can you not order this? Does this go with this? Does this end this combo? And then take that, save the order, and then kick to the POS system from there. Now, the other interesting thing is how we handle human in the loop. So humans are still there. I think the really important thing people think about is like we're automating everyone away. It's not the case. The goal is to just help people get more accurate orders at the end of the day. If you think, like, if anyone's worked at like a Wendy's or a fast food restaurant, like, you know, the challenge, you're doing probably 5 different jobs. You're trying to take the order, you're trying to put it, like, take credit cards, etc. And there's 2 pieces of accuracy, right? It's taking the order and then it's making the order and giving it to the person. And so we're just trying to solve that upfront accuracy, because humans are really only 60 to 70% accurate. If we can get that even to 80, 85, we're still doing a lot better for like food loss and et cetera to make this thing a lot better. There's always going to be humans in the loop. People sometimes don't want to talk to bots. Sometimes they just say wild things like adding 99 burgers, 99 fries, 99 shakes. You've seen that. They also will just play Travis Scott music. Like if you went to McDonald's and that promo, like the list goes on to the crazy stuff that people do. But they also assume the bot will be wrong and wants it to be wrong, even though they're just not saying the right thing. Perfect example. I went to the store one day and some lady was like, well, can I get a number one? And a number one is actually, I know this whole menu like the back man. It's a single, a double, or a triple. And then you can get a drink, etc. And she's like, I want a small. And the kid that was taking the order was like, well, we don't like, but do you want a single, double, or triple? And she said, I want small. And so like, she's not saying it correctly, but we have to figure out how to make it work for her because she's just going to assume the bot doesn't work. So we have to make sure all those things happen, but also seamlessly give it over to the people at the store. So we actually save that order off, and then they can have that to follow up if something occurs in the middle of the conversation.
So Cam, I have a quick question because you were talking about quickly about like the whole edge deployment versus cloud. Like, speak to that a little bit. Like, we're not putting hardware in each one of these stores or some sort of Google proprietary edge appliance at each one of these stores. It's going stream straight to cloud effectively.
Right. Yeah, we're just doing everything. They have their own digital menu board. So like one challenge is like anyone who's has went to a Wendy's, like, you know, you have your franchisees and you have your corporate stores. They're different tech stuff to handle. Like we didn't want to at the time, and I don't know if it's still the case, but I think at the time, like we don't want to handle and deal with franchisees and everybody. Like we just want tech to work. And so the deployment itself still ran on cloud-based and would just be web browser-based. So we don't have to worry about any of that. So if they have a digital screen, we just went web browser-based, hooked into the hardware, and we were good to go. I think there was one service that handled like just the WebSocket connection out to the cloud. But other than that, we don't put any hardware in. This goes on. And if they have a better mic, et cetera, that's just going to be better quality at the end of the day. Oh yeah, dude. Like people try to break this thing all the time. Like, yeah, like the whole I forget the show. I sent it to you, Andres, a bunch of times. But like, yeah, people go up like 99 fries, 99 shakes, 99 this, 99 that. Like we have safeguards built in to protect against that. But also like I think I was talking about it before, the sauces. Like usually people at the store were just like, we don't care, just throw them in the bag, right? Like they're supposed to charge for those sauces. And so when we did this programmatically, we actually saw like bag size increase because they're charging for sauces that they should have. And so there's like a lot of different little like changes to this. But on the LLM side, yeah, people try to break it all the time. Like it never ends. Then people try to talk to it, say, hey, like do this in the sound of Moana or like one of the Disney songs. List goes on. So it is very interesting. And they just want it to be wrong. Like think about like I don't know if anyone's in this camp or not here, but like people were pumped when self-checkout came out, and then now people are pissed that self-checkout is out because they don't want to do the store's job or whatever. And like how quickly people can change technology and like their opinion of it, even though it's been out there forever. So it's just people are fickle, and it's very interesting how it all works out. I talked about some of this already. You know, I think that, and Andres, you kind of mentioned this, like the big thing, and this is kind of a view for the future, but you know, I'm not speaking for Wendy's. Like, since this is all cloud-based, we technically could take this anywhere. One idea, like we always spitballed, but we kind of came back to like, hey, we do things at the drive-through. Is like, what if you could just like drive up to a parking spot? Like, think about McDonald's use case. Drive to a parking spot or your pickup, any pickup location, pickup spot. You just talk to it on your phone. It does the order and then puts the order in, and then someone will bring it out to your car. There's operational challenges around that, but I think the point is that you know we could take this technology anywhere because it's all cloud based. It's not hardware based. Which one? I said Lou. If you want to, what do you mean on the 2 years to adopt?
I think it's more about a reference, like potentially how long it takes for like us as the humans to get used to the technology. Like one of the things, which is true, is these elevators. Those elevators are like they confuse people every time they approach those elevators. And you have to put the number in from the outside of the elevator and not from the inside of the car.
And then people get on the wrong one sometimes because they just pop on the first one that's there.
Yeah.
it's very interesting, and I think, you know, I do like, there's my personal opinion come into place. Like, I do think people have over-indexed right now on chat interfaces, because you know, my parents, etc. Like, and I'm from a small town, right? Like, they don't want to use that, and I think we'll see a change in how large language models are used. Like, if you think about like traditional search, I think we just released it in IO, like just searching for it and getting the summarized answer where you want to. It's going to be interesting where like users go to, but I mean, it's going to be a while. People are still figuring out how to interact with it, but you know, you got your high schoolers that cheat on all their homework with large language models. Like, they come up and might use them all as we go. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, I mean, the technology can be used anywhere is kind of the point. And then just sports centers, intranets. I think that's where we've thought about other options for large language models. Just, hey, how can we search the corpus of our information internally and look up something? How can we, if you think about credit reports, how can we look for derogatory information, i.e., like, did I miss a credit payment, etc., and surface that to the user so that people like underwriters don't have to go and look for like that specific information and possibly miss it. There's tons of different use cases for large language models, and I think it gets more and more creative every single day. And there's always, it's not just the text summarization and generation, it's just a way that you can use those capabilities to take something that's super ambiguous and then make it into a programming problem, is what it gets down to.
Did you mention how many stores this was installed in?
Yeah, so it's over. I know it's over 10. I think, I don't know if I can speak that. I know how many they want to have by the end of the year. I mean, here's the hiccup, right? Is that you had like all of the franchisees, not all, some of the franchisees are on just different versions of hardware. And when I say hardware, it's not like necessarily the compute, but like the super old microphone boxes that sit out there, and the audio quality. Like, it's not that we couldn't hook into those, because we actually did at one point. It's that the audio quality is so horrible that like it's even hard for people at the store to hear. And so then it's like, okay, well, we have to downsample a little bit and send it to the cloud. Like, it's even going to be worse at that point. So you've got like kind of an audio quality challenge that you want to deal with. And so they kind of, they're doing refreshes on all their digital menu boards. So we're kind of riding that rail as they go forward with it, so that we can be able to do visual cues along with have better audio from the microphones going forward. But the challenge is really around like manufacturing and construction of those. Because one, it's chips. Everyone wants chips right now. People can't get chips right now. And two, it's just, you have to take a whole drive-through out of the way. And that's, operationally, that's kind of a challenge, right? And you want to make sure that you're not breaking up most of your like revenue stream. So the tech-wise, it's in a good place. And it's a little bit of a challenge from store to door, because regionally it can be a little bit different, but it's in a good place. It's really just about, how do you do all that like kind of manpower type stuff more quickly. Ramon, go ahead.
Yeah, to follow up.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you didn't install any hardware. So can you just talk a little bit about how this integration worked into the actual order taking? So how did you integrate the model and all the data that comes out of it into their actual existing hardware to process, how they normally charge for an order or build an order, et cetera?
Yeah, so that digital, they have some compute in the store already. So there's just one little service at the store that has a WebSocket connection for the audio feed. And that audio feed digital menu board already has APIs that kind of hook to it. So that's the one piece that's in the store. And then the rest we did cloud. So you think about the large language model, cloud speech, the model that essentially matched all the synonyms and aliases, and the one that matched the menu, that's all cloud-based. So that sits up cloud. The interaction's pretty quick, so it wasn't worried. And then to hook into the store for the actual POS system, there's already an integration, because a lot of stores already have a DoorDash feed or something that has to interject into the door, like the NCR POS system. And so we rode those rails from there on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. But a couple like more ideas, and I've got, Andrea said I worked on some other things. Like I've had some other interesting things I've worked on, but one is really around like Square Companion. So this was a tie-in to how do you answer questions? You know, what vegetarian options do you have? What comes on this burger? A list goes on. So you saw that diagram before, and it was really just a little bit different model that used embeddings to research, take their menu in, take around like articles, etc., and then answer questions about the menu, and list goes on. This one's more interesting in a way because you actually have to figure out what do they not want people like to answer. So they actually don't want to answer things about like calorie intake and like dietary because you can get sued for that. So like, all right, well, don't have a large language model do that and possibly hallucinate, even though like most of the time it would not, but you don't want to take that risk. So just anytime that happens, kick it to a store employee. But if you ask what's on a burger, they'll answer that for that piece. Some options. And then another one, and you could take that essentially to the web, which is what we did. Let me see if I have access. Yeah. And like different ways to interact with customers. So if customers came to the site and said, hey, what keto options do you have? Maybe you can redirect them to different pages on the website dynamically using that chat interface. And actually, I think this is a cooler way. We're used to like chatbots just popping up at the bottom and then you had to like link out to the site and then you have to click on it. This is a little bit more native way to handle some of that. Last one is around Restaurant Jarvis. I'm a big Marvel fan, can't tell. And it's really just about how do we help employees in the store. So they have a manual that's 580 pages deep on what should you wear, you know, when do I get paid, list goes on. And so we actually just brought that in and did the embeddings, and then you could ask any question on top of that. And we're going to hook it into the microphones. That one's slowly getting out there. I think they have it on tablets right now, but we want like inevitably we want people to be able to ask the right questions, like, and just hit your device and say, hey, what's this problem? How do I do this? You know, what temperature should the tomatoes be at when they're frozen or like when they're refrigerated? List goes on. But these are some of like the Wendy's use cases. I've worked on Six Flags, where I built a traditional chatbot and like for the park. So I've been to Six Flags, pretty big place. Hey, can you ask questions about the park? But I would classify the question, answer the question, and then at the bottom of it, I would have it answer as if it was Bugs Bunny. So I had the large language model just answer if it was Bugs Bunny, and there's no training. So you just tell it to be Bugs Bunny, it will be Bugs Bunny. And the interesting thing in that case is that Bugs Bunny doesn't answer things in like the way that normal humans would. And so the challenge would be, hey, if I got the 2 steps deep and said, all right, the bathroom is you take 1 left here and 2 rights here, then Bugs Bunny would be like, all right, well, you take a left at Albuquerque and then you do this. And you're like, well, that's not right. Like you can't do that. So there was a lot of little tuning and interesting things, but there's a ton of interesting and just creative possibilities with large language models just because it's trained on the world's information. And it's just going to get better and keep getting better, especially as token sizes increase and reinforcement learning gets better. That's just going to get more and more interesting and creative is probably the best word to say. So any question? I just kind of went through there. Search and embeddings, sadly, and there's a lot. There's like probably 5. You can do it in Redis data stores. You can do it in Postgres. You can do it in a native way that we have. And then we also have, well, we've changed the name like 3 times. We have Agent Builder that you can directly just put your PDFs in and search directly on that. The Fox Deportes. Which one was that one we were talking about? Oh, you're talking about the one that we did for the
like the pseudo auto translating type use case that we're trying to do, where we had, was it a Spanish? I think it was a Spanish broadcast, and then we're trying to subtitle it basically through AI automatically. So we didn't have. It was kind of a cool story because you don't think about the back end when you have subtitles. You literally have a human there, like typing subtitles.
Yeah, it's so we were in Andres, feel free to jump in. Like we were working on a use case where essentially, you know, they want to do subtitling. And subtitling traditionally has been you call up somebody who is a native speaker, and then they translate. Well, I think as we all know here, like, you know, Google Translate's been out there forever. It works, but doesn't understand context. But then even like translators, because I had Andreas help me with this one, like don't directly say exactly what a person has said. It's kind of like their interpretation, obviously, of what had occurred in the translation. So what we did was we had a soccer cast that essentially said, hey, take this text, which was, I think, directly in Spanish. This is a soccer game. It's these players playing and these teams, and we're doing a recap after the recap interview after the game, and do a translation. So that then instead of it doing a direct translation saying, hey, the goal fell in, or list goes on, it says, hey, like we scored a goal, they did this, they're a great team, and would reference the exact team because it understood the context of what the translation should be. And that was what we used a direct large language model for, which actually I don't know if you saw this, they actually released something like that at I/O to do that.
Oh, I did
in
see
search.
that.
So I'm like, all right, we were ahead of the game a little bit. That's cool.
Yeah, and then the other thing was like, so basically it was like there was a game in the CONCACAF finals. I think Mexico was playing. I don't know who it was, and the interview was a Mexican player after the game. And you never stop and think about like all of the idiosyncrasies that go into trying to do this mapping until you actually start the process. No different than with the Wendy's and the 7 billion different options for a Wendy's burger. But it's like the context of the words and then the slang that every sport has is different and doesn't translate one-to-one if I opened up Google Translate and tried to translate it from Spanish to English. And then on top of that, specifically with Spanish, you have a lot of different variations of Spanish based on what country the player comes from. And so helping them with, okay, I think what he's trying to say is this, and then trying to get the model to reproduce what we thought he was trying to say as opposed to some variation of a strict translation was quite interesting. I think eventually it was solved by one of our other teammates where he essentially was able to put a persona behind the LLM and say, summarize this as if I'm a reporter. And I think that's what actually ended up like getting it to like clicking this into place and getting like a really good point. Being is that we wanted to just provide some other examples. Cam and I have worked on a couple different ones, like the Six Flags one. There's a ton of other probably off recording, off, next time we have a happy hour and I'm in Miami, I can give you some of the other funny components of that opportunity. But as you can imagine, Bugs Bunny is not the most PC character either. And so that led to a bunch of other funny subtexts. And so, yeah, so point being, we didn't want to just make this like a strict Wendy's thing. Obviously can't put a lot of time into that, but there was some other funny things that I thought were applicable to this audience, specifically the soccer analogy, because I thought it was, as a Spanish speaker myself, again, you just don't think about this stuff. You just, you hear the words and like your brain automatically translates and like, oh, okay, he meant this clearly. Right. And then I remember having to go back and search and like, what game was this? To try to remember, like to try to recap what actually happened. Like, what was he referencing when he was talking? Because there was some things, I forgot the exact term he used, but something about like, he hit a post or something. And I'm like, is he meaning that the soccer ball hit a post? Or is there like some slang that he was trying to insinuate? And anyways, there's some really cool things when you start going down this rabbit hole of AI, specifically with LLMs, because to Cam's point, there's tons of information. This thing is constantly learning, but it's also like learning very kind of in general strict variations of these things and not broader applicable use cases. Right or wrong?
In regards to learning, was the system designed to also learn from the people requesting, orders and whatnot, or was there any component of machine learning when it came to the actual orders?
So we didn't do any fine tuning on top of the model, just because there's like the only place that you would really fine tune and like where like as in technology we need to get better at speech to text. Like, and it's not really about like accents or anything. Like, it just speech to text is still behind. And so I think you could use recordings to fine tune that, but the rest is pretty good out of the box because it's it's not necessarily proprietary knowledge. Like, and you would have to go through and kind of click and say, hey, like this is right or this is right. Like we mostly did everything. Like at every level, we have analytics. We stay away from biometrics and everything because that's a whole different challenge, state to state, and you don't want to be in that game. But we kind of kept it to we haven't needed to fine tune, and the only place I think you'd really only fine tune is in speech to text. But right now, the technology in speech to text isn't good enough to say that's going to make a real difference. We had plans, but we were just like, it's not going to do much.
Yeah, I just figured, with so many different people ordering so many different types of things, and it almost feels like there's an opportunity there to learn trends and how people order things. Or
oh yeah, we for sure have like that side. We have more analytics and some pieces around regionalization for, hey, like assumptions of what is a burger. So like in Texas, Wendy's has a Texas burger, and it's not a Dave single, so it's a Texas single. So you have to then make an assumptions of what a burger is, and so that's where some of that comes in. But like the pipeline to actually take the order is pretty good in itself, that it doesn't need a ton of fine tuning. But in that case, yeah, like we see more regionalization so that more inherently, like the conversational UI is improved, because that's what it comes down to, is like, when do you ask a follow-up question or not? Because if you ask too many, then people are pissed and the line backs up, and then someone just has to interject. So you have to do some leaps and bounds on assumptions that you make too. So, Nick, go ahead. You're on mute.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same, Nicholas, but he was asking about Wendy's Rewards members and linked to their account. I don't know if there's like a barcode or if there's a.
Oh, yeah. So like that's like on the. I can tell you how you could do it, but I mean we've talked about the concept of like, well, in two ways. That's where you could get into the biometrics game, or in the license plate scanning game, and say, hey, this person is tied to this.
Oh, that's cool.
But then you have to deal with the legal side.
State laws.
In Illinois, where like
Yep.
McDonald's got sued a lot.
Can't do
for
that.
a lot of money for taking license plates. And then you got to deal with like, states like California that have CCPA, that you have to delete everything you know about me. Like, it's just a game that, like, if you get it wrong, it goes really bad, and you're not going to get a ton of benefit if you do it well. So that one we try to stay out of the game on, and I probably would still stay out of the game on if it's my decision. The other one is around speaker ID. So like, think about this is more like localized processing. How do you get the right voice? So like, i.e., me and my wife are in the car, my two kids are in the car losing their shit. Like, how do you know it's me ordering something and triggering on my voice and not on the two kids losing their mind in the back seat? So there's some things around that, but again, it speaks just to the challenge. Like, there are other things that come up that you're like, that we'll get that as we go forward. But speaks to the whole, I think, can be improved. But you could link it. It's just, if you get it wrong, it's going to be really bad.
Well, and that brings up the whole thing. Is like, there's a lot of things you could do, but then there's also all the mitigating factors you have to deal with. Not only like what you already talked about, which is like the fact that you can't work with a blank canvas in these scenarios, right? Like, everyone has different microphones, different hardware setups, different even software setups, right? There's different back-end POS systems, if I'm not mistaken, right? Cam, on some level,
Yep.
They're still merging that, right? So it's like, not only are you dealing with that, but then you're dealing with all the legality. I think you even mentioned pretty quickly, but you mentioned the whole like calories thing and how you could be sued for like insinuating somebody needs too many calories.
Yeah.
Anyways, I mean, some of us grew up, at least, Cam, Rowley, and a few of others grew up during that whole wild McDonald's coffee lawsuit case, right? I'm sure everybody remembers that. So like, that's like right at the beginning of all this stuff. Anyways, Rowley, go ahead.
So I was going to ask a random question, I guess. I'm curious about the latency. I'm working on a voice AI project myself now, and I know that we battle with having a latency that feels natural. I'm curious, how is this performing?
I would say, let me see if I can get roughly round trip at the beginning is around 3 seconds. I think it's down to 1.5 seconds now. But if you do if the UI had like the 3 dots on your Google Home or something, like there's a lot of perception of latency. So there's like latency as a whole, and then there's the perception of latency. So like a good use case around this is like the airport where you go and you're like picking up your bags, right? Well, like if there's no screen telling you your bags are about to be there, you're like, this is taking forever because you don't have like the concept of knowing what's going on. But if they have screens that say, hey, your bags are here or here, people are less frustrated about it. So like kind of showing even those 3 dots, you can be like, okay, it's loading and it's doing something. It's not as big of a deal. There's also just little visual things that you can get people to look in different ways and distract them to then get it to work more efficiently or to your hand. But like roughly about 1.5 seconds. But I think for us, it's quick because our context set, like in these large language models, like our output tokens are large, but our input tokens aren't very big. And so you're not seeing like a ton of latency or computation on the in, just on the out, most likely. So I think that's the challenge. Like if you're building something now, like if you're pumping a ton of information in the context size and like doing RAG and etc., like you're gonna see a bigger latency to where you might need to go a little more piecemeal with the information that you give and do like an upfront classifier to say, hey, which is what I did for Six Flags, like what information are people asking about? Let me go get that direct information, because before I had to deal with context size limits. Now that's kind of going away a little bit. Let me get the right information to answer the question. And then it can all be very fast because my calls to the LLM are very, very small. Classifier, answer, call, and I can do that within 2 seconds. Usually those calls are about 500 milliseconds, 200 to 500 milliseconds each. But now you got like GPT Turbo and like everything going out there that like focus on latency and not as much accuracy too. So that biggest challenge, to be honest with you guys, is how do you know what's the right answer? Because if we ask everyone around here and everyone orders something differently, and they may expect the output to be different, and we might not all have the same output. So like especially in like text summarization and generation, it's more around getting everyone in the room to agree what the right answer is. And that's the hardest part. And that's why like sometimes doing those problems kind of sucks, because it's just like, what do we all think this should be? And then you work from there. So it's much different than how you used to do applications and everything, where like there is a right answer. Sometimes there isn't.
So I'm actually dealing with that same problem as well. How do you guys deal with that?
I make everyone put it into a spreadsheet, and I say, "Is this right?" Yeah, and that's one of like the Wendy's use case is easier because there is a right output. There's like hey, I asked for this and this, I should get this. That's easier. What you can do is you can go based on like, well, there's like 3 metrics you can go on. You can either go on distance for how semantically close it is to the original text, or you use Rouge or Blue scores. But the challenge, kind of like traditional ML had for business users, is they don't understand what any of this shit means. They're like, is it accurate or not? And that's like not really the right question to ask. Question is, how close is it to the right answer? And that's where I think just naturally, like if you can explain how Rouge and Blue scores work to say, hey, this is how semantically close it is to the original text that was out there, then you can start to like make your way. But you can't tell them it's Rouge and Blue scores. You got to tell them this is how close this is to this, and then just say at a bar threshold, it was right or it was wrong, and because they're never going to get it. It's just like, and it's not their fault. They just don't understand. Like in the world of original AI ML, now everyone's an expert and they've never done AI and ML practically, and so they don't understand like all the challenges of explaining a problem to somebody in that world. So Andres knows how I feel about everyone who says they're an expert.
Yeah. No, it's been good times. But I mean, it's obviously enrolling those, right? These are complicated problems.
Yeah.
And yeah, people are expecting binary responses. Like, is it accurate? Is a perfect expectation of what people think this is, and it's not. It's shades of accuracy. right?
Yeah. I mean, it's and sometimes it's just, you know, this is right or this is wrong, and you hide it. Like, you don't hide your numbers, but you translate your numbers to something that's a little more readable to people. But there is a phase that is just, hey, we all need to agree that this is right and this is wrong. And that's the only way that you can baseline that something works. It's like gathering requirements in IT. Like, if you don't gather requirements, you're just building stuff for fun, right?
Yeah, and yeah, you also never know when the project is done, right?
Oh yeah, and it's never done at that point.
Correct. Cool. Well, just to keep everybody here to the top of the hour, I mean, if there's one more question, I'm sure Cam won't mind one more, but if not,
Yeah, send me an email or whatever anytime.
be careful. Be careful what you sign up for.
That doesn't matter. That's fine.
I know. No, you're always helpful, man. Any other questions? And if you guys wouldn't mind too on the way out, I think the survey is like 5 questions. We're just trying to figure out like how we pick these back up and do these in an effective manner, and also get a variety of topics, right? We'd love to know what people want to hear about. We kind of just went in the lab, I think Rolly, Ramon, myself, and a couple other guys on the committee, and said, hey, Gen AI, everybody's talking about it. Andres, you work for Google. I'm sure you know somebody, and sure enough, it works out. So cool, man. All right, Nick, yeah, you got a question. If you want to, sorry, you're unmuted. Go for it.
Yeah. Sorry, Meets kind of cut me off and didn't let me talk before. But
All good.
yeah, I guess my question is, how is it that you're dealing with all of the different variations on English or any language for that matter? You know, like, are there just some regions of the U.S. or the world that this is going to lag significantly behind because that variation of their language is just so complex and different, or it just hasn't had enough inputs yet to where it's a good trained model to have good outputs?
I think it's always a little bit of a learning, for sure. Like going into Florida, like it's more around like what are the synonyms that people use to say, and some of that's like a learning experience. Like, Ramon, kind of what you were saying, like on the matching. So like that matching side, which is more like the traditional ML piece of a, like, lack of a better term, fuzzy match to like, or semantic match, I guess the best way to say it. That based on regionality, and I think some of that's like state by state or like Southwest, et cetera, of the United States, will have to continue to learn. The model itself is pretty good at understanding because it's seen things across the internet of how these people talk and how they or not necessarily how they search, but how they talk. But in some stances, like, you know, not to call out Louisiana, but like, yeah, you might not be able to get it. Like, it just might not work out, right? Especially with speech to text, like it just might not. It might not work. It's gonna. I don't know. I always say this, and then like we release some crazy, wild stuff that, like, every quarter, like this space gets wilder and wilder. So I can't even make a prediction that some of the work. I think what I could say is that it's really based on like, do people want to use it? Like, kind of like self-checkout. Like, there's just some people that just will not use a bot. They want to talk to a person, see what's on, and so it'll be interesting to see if that changes over time.
Okay, so sorry. So one other question real quick. Yeah. How's it that you deal with then like switching up a language in the middle of a conversation, like Spanglish or something like that? Is that handled just fine, or does that throw a curve?
Speech to text is the challenge on it. So like the model, like the foundational model itself is good. It does a good job. So like you could do like Hindi and English, what goes on, but speech to text is where it becomes a challenge if it does the translate properly. So like doing the auto detect on like, hey, what language is it and what do you send it to? That's where it gets thrown off a little bit. So yeah, like because of other things, it's just like do we see most people doing that? Not really. And because the other thing you have to make a leap to is that because people have talked to horrible bots in the past, they were usually somewhat clear at what they say, and they won't, unless you want to trick it up, they usually don't trick it up too much. So, but it can happen. It's something to be solved. I mean, it's handled in Spanish now, but yeah, the in the middle is still a little bit of a work.
Interesting.
Cool.
It's interesting how people.
Thanks, Cam.
Yeah, no problem.
No, I appreciate it, and this was great, great back and forth too from lots of people. Great questions.